And I think I'm legendarily the first guy to actually strike Fonzie. I kicked him through the stained glass window of Al's drive-in.
Without a doubt, Henry Winkler is one of Hollywood's nicest personalities. Yet his career holds an untold story of conflict. His 6-decade entertainment industry presence and portrayal of Arthur Fonzarelli on Happy Days from 1974 to 1984 brought him fame. But not all backstage relationships matched his public image. And one co-star relationship remains unhealed, a rare dark spot in his otherwise warmly regarded Hollywood trip. Who was it, and what really happened between them?
I ran into Tom and Rita at an award show just before the pandemic.
Stick around, because by the end of this, you'll be discovering everything you thought you knew about Hollywood friendships. Let's get into it. First meeting on Happy Days. Tom Hanks and Henry Winkler's paths first crossed in 1982 on the set of Happy Days. And, funny enough, that seemingly small moment would go on to have a much bigger impact than either of them could have imagined. At the time, Happy Days was already a household favorite, running strong since 1974, and Winkler was the undisputed star of the show. His character, Arthur "the Fonz" Fonzarelli, started as a supporting role, but quickly became the face of the series. Meanwhile, Hanks was still a relatively unknown actor, bouncing around from one TV role to another, just looking for his big break. Who would have guessed that his guest appearance on this classic sitcom would be the stepping stone to one of the most legendary careers in Hollywood? Life is funny like that, isn't it? Now, here's where things get interesting. Hanks wasn't just some random guest star playing a forgettable role. Oh no, his character, Dr. Dwayne Twitchell, had a personal vendetta against the Fonz. Apparently, Fonzie had wronged him way back in 3rd grade, and Twitchell had been holding on to that grudge ever since. Henry Winkler is the ultimate nice guy of Hollywood. But what if I told you that even he has a Hollywood enemy? Who is it? What did they do? And why did it leave such a lasting mark on Henry Winkler? Stick around, because the truth behind this shocking Hollywood fallout is worth every second. Talk about carrying a chip on your shoulder. So when Hanks showed up in his judo karate outfit, ready to throw hands, or rather feet, audiences were in for a shock. The Fonz, the guy who was basically untouchable, finally met someone who could take him down. And that's exactly what happened. Hanks's character actually kicked Fonzie straight through the stained glass window of Al's drive-in. It was one of those TV moments that fans would never forget. But here's the thing. While audiences were entertained by the on-screen fight, what was happening behind the scenes was even more significant. This wasn't just another guest spot for Hanks. This was his golden ticket. At the time, Disney was on the hunt for a leading man for a little movie called Splash, and they were struggling to find the right fit. According to Hanks, no one wanted to work for Disney, and no one would take the job. A major Hollywood studio struggling to get an actor to sign on? Wild. But then, some Disney exec had a light bulb moment. They must have been sitting there, scratching their heads, when suddenly someone went, "Wait a second. You know that guy who just kicked Fonzie through a plate glass window? He might be perfect." And just like that, Hanks found himself at the center of one of the biggest romantic comedies of the decade. To be fair, Hanks had been working his way up for a while before Splash came along. He had appeared in shows like The Love Boat, Taxi, and Family Ties, and he even had a role in the 1980 horror film He Knows You're Alone. But let's be honest, none of those roles had really put him on the map. It wasn't until he quite literally kicked down the door, or in this case, kicked Fonzie through a window, that Hollywood finally took notice. Funny how things work out, huh? And here's the more interesting part. Hanks and Winkler would cross paths again. Years later, in 1989, when Winkler was hired to direct Turner and Hooch, The Buddy, the cop movie about a detective and his slobbery dog partner. Now, you'd think that by then, they would have been on good terms. After all, Hanks owed at least part of his success to that Happy Days episode. But no, things did not go smoothly. In fact, whatever tension might have existed between them back in the 80s only seemed to get worse. Winkler was fired from the movie after only 13 days, and to this day, there are rumors that Hanks had something to do with it. What happened? Did old grudges from Happy Days resurface? Did they just not get along? Nobody knows for sure, but one thing is clear. That one Happy Days episode didn't just shape Hanks's career. It also set the stage for one of Hollywood's most talked about behind-the-scenes feuds. Turner and Hooch. Oh, the drama behind Turner and Hooch. Who would have thought a buddy cop movie about a man and his drooling dog could have so much chaos behind the scenes? But that's exactly what happened when Henry Winkler and Tom Hanks clashed so badly that Winkler was booted from the project after just 13 days. Now, let's rewind a bit. Imagine this. Henry Winkler, forever beloved as the Fonz from Happy Days, is trying to establish himself as a serious director. He'd already directed one feature film, but this was his big shot, his golden ticket to being taken seriously in Hollywood. When Disney came knocking with Turner and Hooch, a lighthearted comedy about a cop and his slobbery sidekick, Winkler wasn't entirely sold on the idea. He had that little voice in his head, the one we all ignore sometimes, telling him, maybe this isn't the right fit. But ego is a tricky thing, isn't it? Despite his gut feeling, he convinced himself that this was his moment, that this was the movie that would prove to everyone he wasn't just the Fonz anymore. So he said yes. Now, when Winkler commits to something, he commits. He dove headfirst into preparing for the film, spending 11 long weeks meticulously planning every detail. And in that time, he bonded hard with Beasley, the big, lovable Dog de Bordeaux, who played Hooch. Now, Tom Hanks was already on his way to being the Tom Hanks. He had that easy charm, that natural humor, and, let's be real, that undeniable star power. He wasn't just some up-and-comer. He was a guy. And on a movie set, when the director and the star don't vibe, it's like oil and water. Tension starts creeping into every interaction. At first, it was little things, disagreements about how a scene should play out, differences in creative vision. But the real breaking point? That came in Carmel, a picturesque town in California, where they were scouting locations. Now, here's where things get brutal. Just 13 days into filming, Henry Winkler got the call. And not the gentle, hey, let's have a chat kind of call. No, this was Jeffrey Katzenberg, a big-deal Disney exec, basically saying, pack your stuff and go home. No sugarcoating, no long explanation. Just boom, fired. And just like that, Winkler was out, replaced by Roger Spottiswoode, who stepped in to finish the film. Now, of course, Hollywood being Hollywood, they spun it as creative differences. But everyone knew there was more to it. And if you read between the lines of Winkler's later comments, the truth is pretty clear. Years later, when asked about the experience, he famously quipped, "I got along better with Hooch than with Turner." That's the kind of line that stings even decades later. And here's the thing. This whole fiasco wasn't just some little blip in their careers. It mattered. For Winkler, it was a gut punch. This was supposed to be his big leap as a director, and instead, it became a cautionary tale. It reinforced a painful lesson: always trust your instincts. As he later reflected, When your instinct knows to turn around and go the other way, do not second-guess yourself. Because, man, did he second-guess himself here, and it cost him. Meanwhile, Hanks, he went on to become, well, Tom Hanks, the universally beloved, two-time Oscar-winning, Forrest Gump playing, Saving Private Ryan leading megastar. But that lingering tension, oh, it never really went away. Even years later, there was a careful dance when either of them was asked about Turner and Hooch. Winkler never went full scorched earth about it, but you could feel the unspoken resentment in his words. And Hanks? He mostly stayed quiet on the subject. Because when you're Tom Hanks, you don't need to rehash old Hollywood drama. You just keep moving forward. You know Henry Winkler. But there's one person Henry Winkler definitely does not love. Who pushed him over the edge? And why, even after all these years, does Henry still refuse to let this one go? Well, buckle up, because by the time we get to the full story, you'll see Henry Winkler like you've never seen him before. The Carmel Incident. When you know all about the beef between Henry Winkler and Tom Hanks from the Turner and Hooch set, something pops up like the Carmel Incident that shocks you. What happened? It all started with what seemed like a completely harmless, everyday moment. The kind of thing that happens all the time when two famous people are out in public. Henry Winkler and Tom Hanks were in Carmel, California, scouting locations for Turner and Hooch, when a woman suddenly rushed out of a shop, excited as could be. But here's the thing, she wasn't excited to see Tom Hanks. She was all about the Fonz. I mean, can you blame her? Happy Days was a cultural phenomenon, and Henry Winkler was practically TV royalty. So, naturally, she beelined straight for Winkler, gushing over him like a starstruck fan would. Now, Winkler, being the friendly, polite guy he is, didn't want to make it awkward. So, in an attempt to share the moment, he gestured toward his co-worker and said something along the lines of, "And of course, you know Tom Hanks." Seems innocent enough, right? Just a little moment of casual introduction. Well, apparently, that moment set off a chain reaction that no one saw coming. Tom Hanks, by all accounts, wasn't thrilled with how it played out. Some say he didn't like being treated as an afterthought. Others say he took it as a subtle power move from Winkler. Whatever the case, the moment stuck with him, and not in a good way. The film's director of photography later admitted he saw it coming from a mile away. After Winkler left the project, which we'll get to in a second, the cinematographer told him point blank, "I knew this was going to happen on that day in Carmel." So clearly, the tension didn't just appear out of nowhere. It had been brewing from that moment onward, and what started as an awkward fan encounter slowly snowballed into something bigger. Ron Howard's mediator role. Okay, so let's dive into the whole thing about Ron Howard and his role as the ultimate peacekeeper between two of Hollywood's most iconic stars, Henry Winkler and Tom Hanks. So Ron's friendship with Henry Winkler actually started way back in the 70s, when they worked together on Happy Days. That show, you know, the one where Winkler played the legendary Fonzie and Ron played Richie Cunningham? They were a part of that iconic duo from 1974 all the way to 1984, and that decade-long collaboration gave them a pretty solid friendship. Anyway, what's really fascinating here is how deeply both Henry and Tom trusted Ron. And trust, especially in Hollywood, can be pretty rare, right? I mean, we're talking about some of the biggest stars, and they both turned to Ron when things started to go south. Apparently, both of them felt the need to talk to Ron about their personal fallout. Think about it. When you're in the middle of a heated situation and you need someone to hear you out, you don't just choose anyone. You pick someone who gets you, who understands the history, and who you trust not to take sides. And that's exactly what Ron was. He said it himself to The Guardian, "I'm friends with them both, and both men felt compelled to come to talk to me about it. I mean, how amazing is that? It's almost like he was the only person who could see both sides of the story clearly, the only one who could be neutral and still offer support. Now, if you think about it, this wasn't just some casual friendship they had with Ron. But let's talk about Ron's role in all of this, because he really stepped up as the peacemaker. He wasn't about pushing for a quick fix, which honestly could have easily been the temptation for anyone else in his position.
You went to the Yale School of Drama, Henry. Come on, you know you can do it.
Can you imagine being the one stuck between these two and trying to solve things right away? That could have gone horribly wrong, but Ron didn't rush it. Instead, he said he just listened. He was there to hear them out, to be that neutral party where they could vent and reflect. Ron also didn't give up on their friendship. He kept both of them in his social circle, inviting them to his birthday parties. And it wasn't just about the invites, it was about creating an environment where maybe, just maybe, these two could reconnect. He didn't try to force anything, but instead, he made sure they had the opportunity to see each other in a relaxed, friendly setting. I think that's such a thoughtful move on Ron's part. It shows that he wasn't just trying to be a mediator in the traditional sense. He genuinely cared about his friendships and believed that time and space might allow things to heal. Henry Winkler is one of Hollywood's most beloved stars, but there's one person he could never bring himself to forgive. Stick around, because not only will we reveal who it is, but we'll also tell you the shocking new developments in this decades-long grudge. And trust me, you won't believe what's happening now. Recent developments. So, you know how there's always that buzz about actors and their off-screen relationships? Well, when it comes to Henry Winkler and Tom Hanks, the story behind their dynamic is kind of fascinating. For years, there's been this quiet undercurrent of tension between them, and honestly, it wasn't until more recently that things started to shift in a big way. The first real glimpse of what was going on behind the scenes happened during the 77th Golden Globe Awards. If you watched closely, you might have noticed Winkler's expression when Tom Hanks was up there accepting the prestigious Cecil B. DeMille Award. It wasn't exactly hostile, but there was definitely something there, something that made you wonder, wait, is there more to this story? That little moment sparked a whole lot of speculation about their relationship, and let's just say the public seemed very eager to dig into what had been a pretty private rift. But hold up, it's not all bad news. Fast forward a little, and there's this pretty cool shift that happens around the time right before the pandemic hit. Winkler was chatting on Andy Cohen's SiriusXM radio show and casually mentioned that he ran into Tom and Rita Wilson at another award show. And guess what? It was very warm. That's right, very warm. Now, let's talk about where they are today because, honestly, it's kind of impressive how they've moved forward. Winkler himself describes their relationship now as cordial. And when you hear him say that, you just know that things have evolved into something much more mature. It's not about some deep, lingering grudge anymore. It's about professional respect, at least from what we can gather. And it seems like the real magic here is time. Ron Howard. Yeah, the same Ron Howard who's basically the glue holding everything together. He offered some really insightful thoughts in an interview with The Guardian back in October 2023. He mentioned that it's been a lot of years, with plenty of water under the bridge between the two men. That really hit home, right? When you think about it, years of distance and professional success have probably put a lot of things into perspective for both of them. But let's be real here. It wasn't all smooth sailing. Winkler, for one, has had to dodge a lot of questions about the past. You know, people are always digging into old stories, trying to get those juicy details. But Winkler, he's been super diplomatic about it all. When asked about the rumors and everything that people thought they knew, he just told TMZ that what everybody says and what is true are two different things. That's him pretty much saying, I'm done with the drama. Let's keep it moving. And as for Tom Hanks, well, he's been the master of silence on this whole thing. It's like he's taken the let it go route and stayed completely mum on the subject. He's always been that way, right? Just quietly letting his work do the talking. Honestly, in a world where everyone is all about making headlines, Hanks's quiet approach is kind of refreshing. When you think about the bigger picture, their relationship now feels like a reflection of a wider trend happening in Hollywood. It's like this shift toward making peace and finding common ground. It's not just about egos anymore. It's about acknowledging the past, but moving forward. And honestly, that's kind of the vibe in the industry these days. People are learning to work through their differences while still staying true to their art. Howard even pointed out that both Winkler and Hanks have been able to move past creative differences, and that's kind of a big deal. So yeah, time and maturity did wonders for these two. They've learned how to focus more on their current work than on the things that happened years ago. It's a powerful example of how even the most complicated relationships can evolve, especially when you're both committed to growing professionally and personally. In the end, this whole saga is kind of a reminder that things don't always stay stuck in the past. People change, and sometimes that change can lead to a stronger, more respectful relationship. Henry Winkler and Tom Hanks have definitely shown that. After all, they've both been in the business long enough to know that it's not about holding grudges. It's about finding a way to coexist, work together, and create something meaningful, even if the history is a little bumpy. It's a beautiful thing to watch, and honestly, it gives you hope that maybe, just maybe, all those old conflicts in Hollywood can be resolved with a little time, a little maturity, and a whole lot of grace. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.